Tariq ibn Ziyad was an Umayyad commander who started the conquest of Visogothic Hispania from 711 to 718 and thus created through his leadership Al-Andalus, the areas of the Iberian Peninsula historically under Islamic Arabic control, which lasted for a long period, from 711 to 1492 with the fall of Granada. Starting from this invasion made by Tariq ibn Ziyad to the fall of the Emirate of Granada. Tariq was a Berber Mawla, or client, of Musa ibn Zubayr, the Umayyad governor of Ifriqiya, northern Africa, and he acted as a local leader of the city of Tangier, from where Tariq would organize and plan his invasion of the Iberian Peninsula. Tariq had actually succeeded a lot in life by being made the governor of Tangier, as he was said to also have been originally a freed slave, or an early example of a Mamluk slave soldier. Tariq was most probably of Berber origin, though there is a lot of changing views on the ethnicity of the tribe that Tariq belonged to. And these varied accounts of Tariq's origin probably have their origin in the fact that this was a very politically important issue in the past, where origin mattered a lot. So various origins due to various political reasons were ascribed to Tariq, and thus you get conflicting reports due to various political factors affecting the recording of history. Anyway, the important part of the history of Tariq begins not in North Africa, but in Visigothic Iberia, after King Roderick of the Visigoths had taken power in the Iberian Peninsula. Julian, the Count of Ceuta, had, as was the custom at that time, sent his daughter, Florinda la Cava, to the court of the Visigothic king. This was done as kind of a hostage system situation, where a king would ensure that the noble families would not rebel against him by having relatives of these noble families come over close to him, so that they could either punish these relatives in their place if their relatives further away rebelled, or positively influence these relatives that would in turn influence their relatives at home by later sending them back. This was to ensure that various clan loyalties would remain strong to the king. However, it seems that Roderick either became infatuated by Julian's daughter or had some other motive against the family of Julian, which made him commit rape against her. And Julian was so enraged by this that he resolved to get revenge. Thus, he entered into a secret treaty with Tariq, Musa, the governor of the entirety of North Africa, currently being absent, to secretly create an army under Tariq's leadership that would sail across the Straits of Gibraltar, as Julian owned a number of ships and had his own forts and bases on the Iberian mainland that could house these troops and help with the logistics situation for the coming invasion to dispose of Roderick. By the way, the name Gibraltar is the Spanish derivation of the Arabic name Jabal Ṭāriq, the mountain of Tariq. And with these plans, Tariq launched his invasion. There is a legend that when Tariq and his troops arrived on the Iberian Peninsula, that he ordered that the ships that they had arrived in be burnt to prevent any cowardice by his people fleeing, trying to take the boats back. Though this is first mentioned several centuries later by the geographer and historical chronicler Al-Idrisi. I very much doubt this account, not just because it's several centuries later, but also due to the fact that we do know from closer sources that they still used ships when they conquered the Iberian islands, such as the Balearic Islands just outside of the coast of the Iberian Peninsula, and that they left troops there as well, which means that they must have needed the ships to supply the troops stationed on these islands. on the coast of the Iberian Peninsula. And it would not make very much sense to just destroy the ships for no other reason than to prevent escape, rather than to send the boats elsewhere, where they could be put to better use. Hence, I very much doubt Al-Idris's account about burning the ships, due to these mentioned reasons. Because 1, they would have been needed to invade the islands, which was done. 2, they would have been needed to supply the troops that were stationed on these islands outside the coast of the Iberian Peninsula. And 3, it would not make economical or logistical sense to burn them rather than just sending them away to do other things, which would have been much more logical to do and serve the same purpose of not making the boats available for an escape. In any case, and regardless of this legend, Tariq won a decisive victory when the king Roderick was defeated and killed on July the 19th at the Battle of Guadalete. Musa ibn Nusayr, the governor of North Africa, having heard about this, decided a year later to assemble additional troops, mainly composed of the Umayyad elite Arabic troops, to plan a second invasion that would consolidate the gains that had already taken place on the Iberian Peninsula, and to expand even further. And within a few years, Tariq and Musa had captured 2/3 of the Iberian Peninsula from the Visigoths. It should be noted that what made these conquests rather easy for Tariq and then later Musa was the fact that the Visigoths were not a unified foe, being divided by various clan conflicts, and many having seen Roderick as being an illegitimate king previously. And there were also religious conflicts between Catholics, remnants of the Arian Christians, which were another branch of Christianity that later died out, who had been the dominant group just a century ago on the Iberian Peninsula. And you also had Jews, who had been treated very badly recently as well by the Visigoths. And you also had people that resented the Visigothic elites that were seen still as foreigners, having come from lands far away and taken over the Iberian Peninsula during the time of the Roman Empire. And the locals still were treated as second-class citizens in comparison to these Visigothic overlords and nobility. And the Visigoths could thus easily be overcome by a strategy of divide and conquer, where you offered certain groups benefits vis-a-vis other groups and thus could divide them to join you or to support you against other groups. So the Visigoths were a lot less united than the Umayyad forces that invaded, though it should be stated that the Islamic invaders themselves were by no means thoroughly united. Within the ruling groups, Arabs, Syrians and Egyptians were mutually suspicious, and none of them could be sure of the loyalty of their largely Berber troops. And no fewer than 23 governors of Spain were named by the Caliph between 732 and 755, so there did exist a lot of fractions within the Umayyad forces as well during this time, and a lot of suspicion of various groups. Far from being a simple narrative of a glorious, righteous conquest of the area for Islam, the conquest and later occupation of the Iberian Peninsula was a lot more complex than this. And it certainly had its darker sides too, as the new conquerors now applied a policy of divide and conquer, with certain groups treated better and certain groups less so, being more suppressed than others, thus dividing people on the peninsula, often utilizing previous grievances as a way to easier manage the population and to suppress revolts against their new conquests in the area. And the subjugation of people was also pretty brutal at times. The Byzantine Chronicle of 741 and the Mosareb Chronicle of 754 and the illustrations of the 13th century Santegas de Santa Maria both describe and depict the brutality by which the peoples of the Iberian Peninsula were subjugated by. A brutality that was initiated by Ṭāriq ibn Ziyad, taking advantage of Julian's desire for revenge in order to launch this invasion of the Iberian Peninsula. Tariq's and Musa ibn Nusayr's brutality are described as the following, with regards to their conquests of the Iberian Peninsula and also of parts of North Africa. He reduced cities to contemptible poverty and afflicted fortresses with siege. He subjugated all of Mauritania, through the bends of Libya, also in the western parts, attacking through the general of his army called Musa. He conquered the kingdom of the Goths and made the land a tributary after removing the kingdom. So the force of the army was gathered against the Arabs, who were together with the Moors sent by Musa, that is, Tariq, Abu Zara, and others. For a long time they had been launching incursions into a province effectively loaned to them, and at the same time were laying waste to very many cities. He penetrated and destroyed the land, long seized evilly, and attacked with whole impiety. On the grounds of this, he butchered all of them with the sword, and thus he devastated through sword, starvation, and captivity not only further Spania, but also the nearer Spania. And the captivity here was slaves from the conquest put to work, especially in the silver mines, which was one of the main riches of the land, the silver found down on the southern Iberian Peninsula, around the area of the Iberian Pyrite Belt, an area that had been mined for silver for a very long time, before the Arabs by the Romans, and before the Romans by the Carthaginians, and had had a long history of slave usage in that area. Slave usage which was often very brutal, being mining slavery, which is one of the most brutal forms of slavery generally in human history, and was now reintroduced, at least on a larger scale, by the Arabic conquests of the area, having disappeared somewhat during the Visigothic era of the Iberian Peninsula. I'm mentioning this because, despite certain views, which are to various degrees right about Al-Andalus being a golden period of the Iberian Peninsula, the conquest of the Iberian Peninsula also held strong elements of oppression and brutality as well. Though it should be mentioned that oppression had in certain instances to be limited on the Iberian Peninsula, as the number of Muslim conquerors was limited in comparison to the native population of Christians there as well. And oppression and brutality was often localized to certain areas and groups of peoples in the initial stages of the invasion and occupation of the Iberian Peninsula. Yet it is important to be aware of the fact that many times in history, one's glorious conquest is another one's oppression and terror, and history usually has more than just one side to it. Speaking about glorious conquests, about halfway through the invasion of the Iberian Peninsula, both Tariq and Musa were simultaneously ordered back to Damascus, the capital of the Umayyad Caliphate, by the Caliph Al-Walid I in 714, where they spent the rest of their lives. This was probably due to fear of Tariq and Musa getting too powerful and too popular due to their conquests, as Musa ibn Nusair was already the governor of Ifriqiya, most of northern Africa, and thus him getting even more successful might become powerful enough to challenge the Umayyads and their central authority. Hence they needed to be removed before they caused trouble. But Umayyad conquests, even with both of them gone, would continue, and the son of Musa, Abd al-Aziz, took command of the troops in Al-Andalus. Though he was assassinated in the year 716, despite this, Umayyad forces would continue to occupy the Iberian Peninsula and expand, and in the 720s they attempted to extend their occupation to southern France. The turning point of their military invasion of southern France came in 732 with their defeat near Poitiers by Charles Martel, but they continued to make occasional raids on the coastal towns of what is modern-day southern France throughout the 8th century. So the Umayyads remained a local threat to the people living in what was back then parts of the Frankish realm, though not to the same degree as they had done previously in their initial invasion attempt. After 732, it was mostly smaller slave raids to take slaves that were carried out. Also, another darker side of the conquest of the Iberian Peninsula is that despite Ṭāriq being a Berber and many of the troops under him and later commanders being Berbers, the Umayyad policy of Arab supremacy would make Berbers an underclass vis-a-vis the Arabs that enjoyed full Umayyad backing in the forces. And at the time of the original conquest, the best lands went to the Arab minorities. Generally, after having conquered the Iberian Peninsula, Berbers would be suppressed and then also at times later removed from the Iberian Peninsula, often by starvation, where they were not given food or allowed to take from the land, unlike the Arabs. And a severe famine in central Spain in about 750 sent thousands of Berber immigrants back to Africa. The Umayyad dynasty, with their Arab supremacy policies, were not nice people towards their non-Arab subjects, generally. And the only reason that Tariq ibn Ziyad could rise to the rank of a commander and be the governor of the city of Tangier was due to the patronage of Musa ibn Nusayr, having been the patron of him and having promoted him. Because within the Umayyad Caliphate, a lot of actions taken by local leaders and local Umayyad representatives were private decentralized initiatives, as the Umayyads had no way of controlling their vast realm directly. They had to delegate a lot of authority to local rulers and local governors to act on their behalf and to rule independently and to make their own rules locally, such as Ibn Nusayr's promotion of Ṭāriq. Thus, Ṭāriq's rise to power over the city of Tangiers and Ṭāriq's later conquest of the Iberian Peninsula should be seen as the result of a decentralized private initiative taken by Ṭāriq and thus also indirectly taken by Musa ibn Nusayr, who had promoted Ṭāriq to the position. But due to the decentralized nature of the Umayyad Caliphate, together with this being a private decentralized initiative, together with the fact that Ṭāriq was a Berber and not a full-blooded Arab, deserving of accolades according to the Umayyad view, has made it so that Ṭāriq is actually a rather obscure figure in history, where the sources about him are from centuries after his death, and they are often contradictory with each other, and not very detailed. Hence we do not know much about the person of Tariq ibn Ziyad. But we do know that Ṭāriq left behind a long and great legacy. He laid the foundation for Muslim rule on the Iberian Peninsula, which started in 711 and ended in 1492 with the fall of the Emirate of Granada. 781 years. To elaborate, that is a couple of hundred years more than from 1492 to our time. It is a long history that would see the Iberian Peninsula become a center of economic, cultural and scientific development. A rather bright chapter of human history that stands in stark contrast to the rather dark beginnings described in this video. And it is a history I wish to tell you more about, and that I hopefully will tell you more about in future videos that I have planned. But for now, I wish to see your comments and questions about this video in the comment section. And if you like this video, please push the like button, I really like that. And I will see you in the comment section and in future videos. Please do subscribe as it would help the channel spread awareness about the humanities.
اشتركوا بالقناة في مثلكم.